recording. Top.
Yep, I see it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we're recording now, but I can trim this. It's not a big deal. That's not the point. All right, cool. So I'm gonna give it a little 3, 2, 1, and then I'm gonna go into the professional mode of what we're trying to talk about, but not change a whole lot. Get another sip of beer first. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right. Good evening, good morning, good whatever it is to everybody. Got a whole team here of great Americans talking about something called post-traumatic growth from the Project Felix. We got Dan, Aaron Weber, Greg Pauly, Jerry Shelton, and myself, Brad Klein, and we're going to do a couple introductions. We're going to go over what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to start a conversation with it. So let's first start off with introductions. That's the most important part. We're going to start with Dan Acosta. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate this, and I'm happy you guys are doing this. So Dan Acosta, calling from, checking in, I guess, from Chicago, Illinois. I served in the United States Air Force from 2002 to 2009 as an EOD tech. December 7, 2005. In Baghdad, I was injured and spent about 3 years in rehabilitation, medically retired in 2009. Good.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Greg Pauly. You're muted, buddy.
You're mute.
Hi, Greg Pauly here. I'm joining y'all from Massachusetts. Currently, I'm serving at Westover Air Reserve Base. I'm the AGR. I'm the program manager, AGR there, and I've had a 20-year career. Still in EOD. Had quite a few experiences throughout my entire career, whether it be deployed or as in civilian status, and a lot of interesting things. Been trying to reach out, trying to help people as much as I can, and looking forward to trying to help out with this project.
Webb.
Hey guys, I'm Aaron Weber. I'm part of the Felix project, and I'm out of Newcastle, Delaware, the 166th. And I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation.
Jerbo.
Hey everybody, Jerry Shelton, Jerbo, coming to you live from Sumter, South Carolina, outside of Shaw Air Force Base, where I retired in 2013 after 30 years of Air Force EOD experience. So happy to be here.
We're glad to have you. I'm Brad Klein. I'm currently at Aviano Air Base, Italy, as the flight chief of the EOD flight. I've also been in right around 19 years and change. Come from Philadelphia originally, and I was stationed with Dan at Hill Air Force Base in Utah for quite a few years, where we had some pretty fun adventures. Various pictures to look back on, especially the picture of my giant beak out on that trip out to the TTU. Dan knows exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, so tonight we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth. Today, I guess, for some of you, we're going to talk about post-traumatic growth. I'm going to do a little bit of a read-through of some material, just kind of get the group on focused on what we're going with. Everybody's already kind of versed in it somewhat. But go through a couple of definitions and then get through some symptoms and then PTSD, and then also talk about growth areas. So the first definition is trauma, a shocking, scary, or dangerous experience that can affect someone emotionally and physically. Experiences like natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, acts of violence like assault, abuse, terrorist attacks, mass shootings, car crashes, accidents. The list goes on. There's a ton of things that can cause trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, serious accident, terrorist act, war, combat, or rape, or have been threatened with death, sexual violence, or serious injury. That first definition of trauma there comes from National Institute of Mental Health. The definition of PTSD is from psychiatry.org. And then post-traumatic growth. The interesting thing about this, it's a concept that's been around for a very long time. This definition comes from the American Psychiatric Association.org. And it's a theory that explains this kind of transformation following trauma. It was developed by psychologist Dr. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the mid-90s, and holds that people who endure psychological struggle following adversity can often see positive growth afterward. If you want to think about it in a different way, it's the old adage of what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. So now we got some definitions down, some symptoms. They fall into 4 categories. The first one being intrusion. Those are intrusive thoughts, things like repeated involuntary memories, distressing dreams, or flashbacks of the traumatic event. These can be very vivid and make people feel like they're reliving the experience or seeing it happen in front of them. Avoidance. Avoiding reminders of a traumatic event, which may include avoiding people, places, activities, objects, anything that could trigger distressing memories. Next, in symptoms of PTSD, alterations in cognition and mood, inability to remember important aspects of a traumatic event, negative thoughts and feelings leading to ongoing and distorted beliefs about oneself or others, like I'm bad, no one can be trusted, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last symptom is, this is not like the final last only symptom, but this is the last symptom that's listed by this source. Alterations in arousal and reactivity. So arousal and reactive symptoms may include being irritable, angry outbursts. The short fuse is what people refer to it as. And now on to what we're going to focus mostly on tonight, the post-traumatic growth positive responses in the 5 areas. And these 5 areas may not always be, you may not always experience all 5 all at once, or it may take you some time to realize you experience some of them after the event, right? So they are deeper relationships, personal strength, spiritual and existential change, increased appreciation for life, and new possibilities. So deeper relationships, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? We're talking about you have more of an empathy with people. You tend to be more authentic and less concerned about being judged, and kind of tend to be kinder to people more often than not. Personal strength. So you've experienced a traumatic event and not only survived after the fact, but you thrive because of it, right? The third domain, spiritual and existential change, that when people that deal with brushes with death, thoughts of suicide, or any experience that makes you realize the life that you have isn't the one you want, you're forced to reflect on deepest questions imaginable, like who am I, why am I here, where do I belong, and you get to use the opportunity to use your pursuit of the answers to change your life. And then a sense of appreciation for life. This is a simple one. We're all military veterans in some way, shape, or form here, and you can think back to some simple things like being able to walk to the shower without shoes on is a simple appreciation for life. The little things that matter, right? But they make big differences because they all add up. Then the last one's new possibilities. When you struggle, the path you're traveling is no longer available. Now you have the opportunity, and if not the obligation, to find a new path. And along that road, you're introduced to new ways of living and new people who enrich your life and new ways of doing things on top of that. So having said all that, right, that's a lot of some book stuff, some written down stuff, some kind of structures and framework to this conversation. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn it over to, we'll start with Dan, talk about some of your experiences and what you learned from them, how you got better from them. And also too, don't forget to share like, hey, what was hard? What challenged me? What was difficult? What took some time to learn from?
Sure. Thanks for those definitions too. It really helps kind of, I guess, formulate or, build a picture about to what I'm going to say. But I think for me, it's been a long road to recovery. And this road there really isn't an end point to this road because it's life's journey. But one of the biggest challenges up front when, as far as going through a traumatic event, was the acceptance piece. I think what it really came down to at the very early stages of post-traumatic event was that acceptance, the positive attitude of knowing that life is going to continue regardless of what this new reality is, but then accepting that reality, that the fact that it happened, and whatever the results were of that traumatic event, they happen, they exist. It's now part of this life. And that was it for me. I mean, the obvious one is a loss of a left arm. So that was, I think, the first thought of after a traumatic event was, well, I guess for any traumatic event, it's like, how am I going to go on like this now? You have all the what ifs. Why me? Why now? But what really took it over, what was the tipping point for me was just the support, the people around me, and just once I was able to accept that reality and share some of the story of what happened, and find out, oh my gosh, well, there's other people who've been through traumatic events like me, and they have their own stories that relate. Then we're able to just kind of grow with each other. But the biggest tipping point was once I was able to get that point of wanting to be ready and wanting to live with at least a positive attitude. I just found the positive outlet, or in the early stages of going through rehabilitation recovery. There were points where I would drink. I would want to get drunk till I blacked out, just to forget or not think or not question or not even miss the people I love most, all my buddies, all my friends. So all that. So anyways, it was positive outlets. And for me, I just been fortunate enough to get involved with a couple of groups who have adaptive sports organizations. So they take not only veterans, but all people with disabilities. We have civilian adult programs and youth programs, but we use sports as a way to live a happy and meaningful life. So that was it for me. But of course, with the growth part, it's just every day. I think the more we learn about it and see others do it, it gives us, I guess, that little bit of excitement or energy to want to do it again. It's that whole motivation, what motivates us to get up, what motivates you guys to wake up, put on that uniform every day. So it's just finding that. But a lot of it comes with support structure. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, that's some good stuff there. And like, you talk about the sports and like working with the community. That's one of the things that gets highlighted a lot in different things you read, different books, different thoughts and perspectives. Is service to the community. Viktor Frankl talks about it, and I'm kind of stealing my own thunder, I guess. But Viktor Frankl talks about it in his book with this idea he calls logotherapy, with helping people to get past like depression and dealing with struggles. And he talks about how these people who may not be the richest people, they may not have the most, but they have enough, right? And they're living, at least they're not starving. They have enough food, they have enough water, they have shelter, they have clothes, but they're still not happy, right? They're depressed. And how do they find a way to not be depressed that doesn't involve pharmaceuticals? And one of the number one things he recommends to them is to find somebody who cannot return any services, right? They go find somebody who you can do something for, who can never repay you for what you do for them. And every single person who went and did that reported like absolutely positive results every single time. It was like nearly unanimous. And I think what that comes back to is like community service, right? Do something for people, and you'll find it pays you dividends in your own mental health and your own well-being, and it connects you to your community on top of that. So it's like it's just hitting so many different targets all at the same time, and just it's connecting you, it's making you feel better about yourself, and it just makes your whole outlook better, I think. And all, like, I think about my time in Boy Scouts and running around back home, and how awesome that was to have that community. So but I feel like I'm stealing the mic too much in case anybody else got anything else.
Hey, can I jump in on something that Dan said about the peer support aspect of it? I was listening just by chance today, Josh Goldberg, who one of the co-founders for Struggle Well, and talks a lot about this idea of having rapport with the clinician. That was something that was missing. And I experienced that myself, talking to somebody about your experience, and a clinician, a mental health professional, and they're like, wow, EOD must be really interesting. You're like, wait a minute, I'm here to talk about like my struggle, not how impressed you are with my story. So we just didn't connect. And Josh was saying that, this phrase, same mud, same blood, came up, like that's why the peer support stuff is so important, because people can actually relate to you. You have a rapport with people, and you feel comfortable sharing and taking in information as well as giving information.
Hey, Jerbo, I love that you hit on that point, because of the fact that this isn't just an EOD thing. This is every person, every walk of life type of thing. We all experience some type of trauma. And that's why when I'm speaking today, just to forewarn you guys, I'm going to just say it out in broader context of everybody that we know in our lives. We all go through it. So I appreciate that point. That was a good one. Oh, the other thing about being a EOD guy, sorry, I don't know how to keep going, but a lot of people like just like suspect, okay, well, you're just a crazy EOD guy. You just, get through it. But what I actually found out for me, the reason why community is so important to me and why one of my positive outlets have been serving others, and you hit it as far as what Viktor Frankl said, of just serving somebody and not expecting anything back. Well, I do it all day, every day. I work with veterans over the last 10 years, and I don't expect anything back from, just maybe hope that they get a little bit of motivation to keep moving forward. But anyways, the point I was going to make is that being an EOD guy, the reason why it feels so good to do this type of work, because it goes back down to that principle of what an EOD tech does: protect lives, save lives, and building property, all that. So I just feel like it's still fulfilling that mission of what I'm doing now, what I've done over the last 10 years to help veterans. It still feels like, rendering safe with IED, something like that. You get that bit of gratitude. So that's where that motivation comes from.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome point to make, and it also has a good translation too. To just like you said, you just want to help people when it comes down to it, right? Now, like the technical details of what that is, like, am I disarming an ID or am I helping this veteran navigate the VA, right? Like those are two very wildly different things in a lot of ways, but at the same time, we care about people, right? And like, it's not just us EOD guys, it's everybody. It's American citizens. We're hoping like care about each other enough. Hey, let's take care of each other, right? Let's do this. And but as veterans, we kind of get that beat into our head, which is a good thing and it's a great thing. And maybe we can help bridge that gap, like I was kind of talking about earlier, by doing that. And it's not just like maybe you can volunteer with a Boy Scout troop or something like that. Some things to think about. But because maybe I'm projecting a little bit, because I can't wait to get back to my hometown and do that, because I grew up in the Boy Scouts, because I'm a nerd.
I'm ready for you to come back to the States, man. I want to do some of that Pennsylvania fishing you guys do out there.
Dude, let me get you out in the Pine Creek. We'll do some fly fishing.
On there.
I'm in. Count me in.
Webb, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So you guys are, I guess we're focusing on post-traumatic growth, but I think the serving the community bit you guys are talking about kind of relates to a common theme that we have, is just kind of finding a purpose. I think that if you can find different ways to either serve the community or help veterans, it can help you find a different purpose, or just really fulfill a purpose if you're having a lull or there's a gap in your life. If you're missing something, you're looking for something. Doing that it's selfless, kind of like protecting personnel, protecting property. It's the same way that works. Help other people that are in need. That's a good thing. I think that's what most of us here are after. Recently, this year, I had a friend, and his name isn't Jack, but I'll call him Jack. And he was part of a drawdown, and he had come home with some experiences that he was not prepared for. And this person had been in the military for over 2 decades, and he had been deployed multiple times, but he had not experienced the things in the past that he experienced on this deployment. So his wife called me and was like, Jack really needs some help. So it's been kind of a longer road getting him some help. But I've been re-engaging with him over the last 6 months, and he's finally getting some therapy and talking to the right people, and he's actually becoming a little bit more open with it, which I'm not a psychiatrist, but in my experience, I think that's progress. But for me, it was a good thing for me to be part of, because that kind of bolstered me up a little bit. It's like, this guy needed help, and I was actually able to be part of getting him the help. But on the post-traumatic growth side, he experienced things that he hadn't experienced before. So going back to the definitions that Brad had given us, he probably experienced some violence. He probably experienced some trauma based on some of the things that he told me. But post-traumatic growth versus resiliency, resiliency is just your ability to bounce back and recover. He is kind of in the growth phase where he had never experienced any of this stuff, so he doesn't really know how to bounce back. But seems like he's on the right path at this point. So it was really cool to be part of, and he's called me a few times and actually just finally asked for help. And I have been offering my help to him for months, weeks. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to help you. He's like, yeah, I know. It's like, I understand the process. So when you figure out, whatever it is you want to do, whatever you think you're ready for, I'll be there. He finally called me one day and I was able to help him, which was great for me, but even more important for him because he needed the help. I said, he's like, how did you get that, how did you get that information, for me so fast? And I was like, I told you, man, I had been doing some of this stuff before. And I can help you, and I'll break my back for you if you really need the help. It's like, it's crazy. I can't believe you got that done. I was like, it's silly. Sometimes when you ask the right people for help, you actually get it. So I really appreciated him letting me be a part of that. That was great for me, but even more important for him to make those strides. And I think he's in that phase now where he's growing. So I am, I don't want to say excited, but I feel fortunate to be able to be part of that process.
That's awesome.
And also just a plug for PTG is it's not only a process, growth is not only a process, it's also an outcome too. So it doesn't mean that you're going to achieve it one day and like Dan was saying and be good and that's it. I'm there. It's going to be kind of a constant struggle. And, just kind of a plug for the tagline that Josh Goldberg will espouse too. It's an outcome and a process. Way to think about it like that.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's one of the big notes that I took from that too is he asked for help, right? That's I think an important takeaway to remember is growth isn't a solo individual sport, right? Like it's a team sport. You need a team, and it's important to recognize that. And you should never feel bad about that either. Like that's a good thing, because that means you're a team player, and it goes back to the whole sense of community and belonging, and it's okay to ask for help in how you grow, right? And it's okay to accept that you're gonna struggle, right? I mean, everybody struggle is unavoidable. Like difficult times in life are unavoidable. It's gonna happen. And trying to pretend like every single day and every single year of your life is all roses and sunshine, that's a bunch of BS. Like it's a lot of struggle and a lot of trauma to get to where everybody is, and hopefully less trauma than not every day, but it gets us to where we are is getting stronger because of it, right? Not trying to avoid it. So just a little 2 pennies I got to add to that. All right, Paulie, you got a story to share?
Yeah, I got a story to share. And just to speak a little bit on Webb, it's absolutely awesome when you actually have somebody that you can help out and reach out to. And I'm actually surprised it only took weeks or months for you to be able to reach a guy, because in my experience, unless you're very lucky, you normally don't have that short of process. Sometimes it's been years. It's an emotional investment of years of trying to help somebody. In talking about post-traumatic growth, for me, my biggest obstacle to getting to the phase where I could actually experience post-traumatic growth was accepting that I was going to disappoint people. I was going to let people down. I was actually not going to be perfect. I was not going to be the EOD tech with the perfect answer every time, and everything was going to work out, because life isn't initial success or total failure. Our job is, but life isn't. And once I started accepting that and actually making my way to the point where mentally I could start helping people, then I actually started having growth. And once I realized that, hey, if you give somebody a 10% solution, it's better than giving them absolutely nothing. And just sitting there in your own little dark echo chamber where nobody understands what's going on in your own head. Nobody understands that, hey, I haven't had the success of helping people out, so I'm going to be mad about all these other things that I wind up blowing up about. And the other part of it is, once you realize that not putting that 10% out there, hey, you might have a lot better solution than 10% solution. But I'm just saying that even if you don't make the effort, sometimes you miss, and sometimes you miss on really good opportunities. And it might cost you a friend, it might cost you a brother. And I can honestly say that I had that experience where there was an EOD tech who he had a cry for help, and that cry for help was an attempted suicide. And I should have picked up the phone and called him. I knew that. But unfortunately, I looked too much into the story, and I didn't actually, instead of reacting to a person in need, I reacted to the story. And that's a personal failing. And by doing that, I know I could have done something, and I didn't, even if it was a 10%. And I've definitely worked to make up for that in the present, where, I mean, I've helped set up counseling at a local church. I have, what they do is they have a PTSD outreach program, and one of the things that you collect there is everything from veterans that show up with stories that think they're going to get something out of it. And then you have your law enforcement individuals, you have your firefighters, and all these individuals that show up to these things. And they all have stories, and it's not the story that you're reacting to, it's the individual. And it's not for me to sit there and judge their story and say, oh, hey, look at all these holes in their story, and then none of this makes sense, and so I'm going to sit here and judge them. It's I need to actually react to the person. I need to actually care about the person, because obviously they're here for a reason, and most people don't go willingly into a PTSD counseling for no reason. They might hide the reason to begin with, but there's a lot of understanding and patience that you have to apply to it. And by working on that type of stuff, it helps you by working on that type of stuff, where you're sitting there, you're listening to other people's stories, and you're not digging into the story. What you're doing is digging into the person, and you start to realize things about yourself. You can start actually building things for yourself, and it helps quite a bit. And you start to go into, well, you get a new phase of growth because of how you've helped somebody. One story where there was a young man who he was a security forces guy who showed up at this veterans counseling group. He'd been booted out of the military after about 2.5 years. And there was a lot of confusion about his story and the story he was telling about doing special forces raids down over the border in Mexico. things that make all of us sit there and say, oh, hey, eventually peeling things back further and further and further. It turns out this guy was raped at pre-deployment training. That was eventually where everything wound up. And he wound up actually getting the correct help and getting the correct everything that he needed. And so all these fantastic stories was his way of trying to justify himself for being at that type of group, for hanging out with your Vietnam veterans who are actually telling stories about how, well, this guy, he has an older gentleman, he's got survivor's guilt. He has survivor's guilt because his best friend jumped on his back during a mortar attack and saved his life. He has survivor's guilt about that. And if you listen to some of the stories that this guy has, it's pretty fantastic. And you understand that this guy, he still carries that guilt. I mean, this many years later. And so you have a kid that's at this type of event and he's trying to make up a story, trying to get some counseling. And eventually you wind up getting to the real issue in a private session. And it's realizing that we don't need to be judging people by what they're saying immediately. Judge them by, well, like, hey, buddy, I can see you need help. I'm not going to sit here and try to argue your facts with you. It's not worth it at all. In 2010, right before I deployed with Webb this last time, I went to it was a free marriage counseling that was put on by, it was the Army Chaplain Corps. And because I was in the National Guard at that point in time, I was able to attend it. It was a strong bonds marriage counseling. They offered it up to everybody that was deploying in the wing at that point in time. And there was probably, there was quite a few pilots that were getting ready to move out the door. And then there was, I think it was a bunch of their support troops through maintenance and in LRS that were also going to the same location as them. They were going on a awesome deployment to Europe. And at that point in time, I don't think I was ready to hear someone be disappointed in me. But one of the pilots stood up and he looked at me and he said, I'm disappointed in you because I thought you were going to have better insights for how to deal with the stresses of surviving a deployment. And he said this to Lisa and myself while we're at a marriage counseling retreat. I mean, they're all fun, these marriage counseling retreats, because you wind up going, they have them at all these really nice locations, whether it be, I think this one was down at Orlando or something like that. It was really nice to be down there, spend some time away with the wife, and have a really good experience. And then you have this pilot stand up and address that, and I was not ready at that point in time to listen to anything like that, where somebody is disappointed in you for not having the perfect answer, for not saying, oh, this is the perfect solution for it, because the reality is we don't have the perfect solution for anything, and accepting that was my ticket in order to start to grow. I don't have the perfect solution for how somebody's relationship should go, and hopefully that pilot has calmed down and found some good solutions for himself, because nobody's going to be able to hand it to him, and I'm definitely not going to be able to. That's enough rambling for right now. Let me kick this mic back over so that way you guys can talk for a little bit.
Hey, before Brad digs into the next talking point, I just want to tell you thank you, man, for sharing that. That was really, really heartfelt, and it's a huge experience, and to share with us all it's really good to hear, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I also realized some of the trouble that I had been in the past, Greg, until I kind of wanted to start helping people as well. And I only wanted to start helping people when I realized how bad off I was, but more importantly, when I realized that I didn't know. Like in the past, I didn't realize. I was just cruising along. I thought this was normal, whatever it was, whatever I had been experiencing. But when I got some more insight on it, it was kind of around the same time that I felt the same way, where I wanted to help other people. I felt that same way. And with the pilot having the perfect answer for something, my immediate thought on that is the only perfect answer, perfect solution to that is that, one, there is none, but if you had to pick one, it's just going to be honest effort. It won't be anything short of that.
Speaking of perfect answers, it reminds me of flight chief at Kadena, Okinawa. You know, finally get to the pinnacle of your career, being a flight chief. I think it's the best job ever. But on the other hand, when someone comes to you with a problem and you don't have all the answers, that really does make you think for a minute, like, shouldn't I? But I guess going along with some of the other things, going back to Josh Goldberg, and this podcast this morning was amazing. Everything's just tying in today. That how can we have the answers if we've never been trained ourselves? So at that time in the early 2000s, we didn't get a lot of training in this area. So when somebody comes to you and they share a deployment experience, they just got back and they watched their best friend die in combat, you know, all I had was just my training up to that point. Family, you know, my mom was amazing, empathetic. Growing up just with someone like that was helpful because it allowed me to just do that, just listen, hug, and then get on the phone after the encounter and start working the phones. Like, how can I really bring some help to this person? But I think as we moved from those days, I think we did talk about it more, and I really feel like our community got a little better at responding to those questions. You know, what can I do? What should I be doing? How's this deployment going to affect my family? When I get back, I saw this, I had this issue, and they really want to talk about this as a community. We've done some training. I know there's the Columbia Suicide Severity Scale is offered now. The Air Force has that information, that training, and I think these are very important. The training aspect of it, like having that perfect answer. You'll never have the perfect answer. I agree with Greg, but to be able to have an answer and not just close the door on somebody because you feel like you're not worthy of helping is really the sad thing. So my hat's off to every one of you who helps on an individual one-on-one scale or a large group setting like Brad does in Aviano. I just think it's indicative of how our community has grown from those days and how we're really making some improvements. And I hope that's true. What do you guys think?
I think, you know, like, man, back to Greg's story of talking about that security forces airman who eventually shared the truth, like that is strength right there. You know, that has got to be so difficult, so challenging to share an experience like that, the actual truth of it. And I hope that through sharing that strength, people see the strength in somebody and can help them find their why and help them to, you know, not go the direction of no purpose, no why, because that goes to a very dark place, right? Which is kind of why we're talking about what we're talking about. So, and that was one of the things that struck me out of that conversation is the difficulty of seeing through the superfluous initial, you know, reaction and really digging into, hey, what's actually going on with this person, what's actually happening, and how can I help them? And like, that's what I think is important, is people need to understand that because something happened to them, it doesn't make them less of a person, right? Like, they're still here, they're still around, and we need to focus on that. We need to help them, remind them of that, of you're still here, you're still surviving, and you can get better despite it, right? You can get better because of it. In fact, you can be stronger and help other people grow and be better people because of it. And that's definitely an extreme case and a very challenging one to talk about and think about. So that one really stuck out to me, Greg. Thanks for sharing that. So I'll go next because I don't want to put Gerbo on the spot too much. I'm going to share two and a half stories. I'm going to talk about kind of some things that happened to me, some things that happened to other people, and then some things that happened in my family life. I'm not going to go super in depth on all of them and take 30 minutes to talk about it, but I think it's important to talk about the things that happen to you directly, things that happen to you indirectly, and also to some things that happen that have nothing to do with being in the military, because we're all human beings, right? That's the human effect. But when I do these talks about post-traumatic growth here at my base, I talk about the things that I've experienced directly, and none of them are as hard. And here's the thing too. While I say that, this is never a comparison, right? We're not trying to say what I experienced is harder than what you've experienced. That's never the point of this. Everybody's scale of trauma is unique to themselves, and it's very subjective. And it's important not to diminish that, right? Some people's trauma is visible. Some people's trauma is not visible. And that's another important part to remember. But for me, this is my personal take, is trauma that happens to me directly is easier to understand, comprehend, and process than trauma that's indirect. And what I mean by that, so, I did a couple of tours to Afghanistan, Iraq, had a couple of close calls. One was a piece of frag hit my pistol from a car bomb that we were working. So, that was pretty close, because, that's close to femoral artery. You could bleed out and die, right? So that was a little bit, that did the intrusive thoughts, recurring memories, the flashbacks like we talk about, that are pointless and serve no meaning, among other operations, other instances. Some post-blast operations, where you see human remains of fellow American soldiers and citizens, and it's just something that sticks with you for the rest of your life and can really make you mad for a long time. I think that's something that, as the EOD community doesn't really talk about a whole lot, is the effects of post-blast analysis. And, that's probably harder than a lot of other things we have to do. But indirectly, the more important thing, the worst trauma I ever experienced in my life, really, for the most part, because it was so unexpected and so out of nowhere, was the loss of Team Lima. When we lost Dan Miller, Tim Weiner, and Liz Lonke on January 7th of 2007. There's no trauma in my life that's ever compared to that. And I'll follow that up with, some other personal trauma that's separated from the military, but still, I can say to this day, like, that's been the worst, because it was unexpected. It was out of nowhere. And, you just didn't see it coming. And, knowing these people and working with these people and loving these people, and they're their friends, family, et cetera, even deeper than that. And then all of a sudden they're gone in an instant, right? Like, that absolutely affected me the most out of anything I've ever experienced in my life. And that didn't happen to me directly. I didn't get hurt from it. I didn't experience anything from it. And, so the important thing to remember is, like, it doesn't always have to happen to you directly. It can happen indirectly in a way. And then the follow-up to non-military related trauma was the loss of my father earlier this year in January. And why I say losing Team Lima may have been harder is because, my dad was not old, right? He was in his early 50s, right? But he had throat cancer for 4 years. So it was something that we never expected to happen, but at the same time, we're, knowing it could be a possibility. But how does this all tie into post-traumatic growth, right? So losing Team Lima, for me, what I took from that was experiencing the that, dramatic loss, and realizing the importance of relationships, improving those deeper relationships, and like the spiritual, like, why am I here? I'm here to make memories of people that matter, right? So, what did I do after that? Like, I went down to Eglin as an instructor at EOD school in Florida for 4 years. And I got a basic preference out of there. So, of course, I went straight up to McGuire near home, near Philly. And I, through a lot of, working from some people that helped me out for sure. It wasn't just an easy, bam, it's done. So I definitely appreciate all those people that made that happen, because for the next 4 years, well, 3.5 years, I did a back-based deployment here and there. But for my time up there, I spent as much time as humanly possible with my dad, because he wasn't sick yet, right, when I got up there, 2014. But it didn't matter. That wasn't the point. The point was I needed to spend time with people that mattered to me. So as soon as I got up there, that was priority number one. Spend as much time with my dad, my mom, any of my best friends I still communicated with, right? That was one of the big, like, PTG response areas that I, like, tried to actualize and live without realizing it, because I didn't read the book until, years later. I don't think it was published till 2016. But I'm so thankful for that opportunity, thanks to, an unavoidable trauma in my life. Like, there's nothing I can do. I can't go back and make Tim, Dan, and Liz be alive again. I can't do anything about that, right? But I can learn from that pain and appreciate what I have now and really capitalize on it and remember the people that I know and love and do what I can to value the time spent with them. That's the point, right? That's the point of post-traumatic growth. Is life is struggle, life is trauma, life is challenge, all of that. You can't avoid it. It will never go away completely. I don't, like, Dan, no, I came out to see you a couple of times. So I came out to see you in San Antonio, went to a Clutch concert, came out to see you in Chicago, we went to another Clutch concert. Had so many good times, man. And it's because, when you got hurt, man, like, that was tough. Like, we thought we were going to lose you so bad for so many days, and we didn't. So I didn't want to waste that, like, that's really what PTG comes back to.
Yeah, Brad, I got to jump in right away, man. You absolutely nailed it. Hit it so hard. It hit me right in the heart. But it's I think the traumatic part that we experience is the loss of that relationship, that meaningful relationship or relationships. In my case, being a true veteran and leaving the EOD career field and all the people I love most. So where the growth comes for me is my life now, where I live now. I never actually expected to come back to Chicago. I planned on, just start or continue my life somewhere else, just work, raising kids. And, but it's been wonderful for that reason that you mentioned of reigniting relationships with my mom, my brother, my sisters, some of my friends I hadn't seen in 10, 15 years. But when you said that, it hit me because, oh my God, that's what I've been doing. And that's why I feel wonderful right now, is because of that. And then again, you just remind me of all the fun times that we had when you came down. Those were those stepping stones to that growth of understanding. That was it. It was those meaningful relationships. I mean, what is life about? I mean, we're here and we will be gone someday, but what do we do in that meantime? And it goes back to that one saying that people never remember what you say or do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's what it is, man. So thanks for hitting that. That was good.
Yeah, man, that's it, man. Like, memories, man. Like, that's what you remember. That's what you take away from this whole experience called life. To me, is memories. And I can remember playing Xbox with my homies, like, maybe a little bit, tiny bit of it. But what I'm always going to remember for 20, 30 years is that Clutch show that we went to in San Antonio or Chicago. I'm always going to remember that. Like, that time we drank way too much freaking Shiner Box and had a good time. Like, I'm going to remember those experiences well past. I'm going to remember taking the easy way out and avoiding any kind of challenge or struggle, like, in a simpler term, something I've come across, like, here in, like, the last couple of like the last year since this whole COVID BS has been going on, right? I'm lucky to live in Europe, and it's awesome to live in Europe. I can travel about, I could travel about and see all kinds of awesome countries and stuff. And then, all these restrictions come in and we can't move about so much, and it makes you really appreciate what you had before, so that when that comes back, I'm going to take advantage of it even more, right? I'm going to start planning all these trips. I'm going to make sure I get out to these places. But it also, in turn, makes me appreciate what I have locally, which is amazing world-class scenery. Like, it's just ridiculous, the kind of like environment and nature that I have within an hour drive of my house. So like, it's how you look at it. It's a perspective. It's like, oh man, I can't go anywhere. I can't go more than 2 hours from my house. Well, what do I have within an hour of my house then? Like, what can I do? I can do something. That's the important part of a lot of this is, when you find the path to post-traumatic growth, you realize like there's a lot more in my control than I realize. And part of it's perspective, right? And part of it's, hey, what do I have available to me? And how can I make that, something of value? So I don't know if that rings any bells for you guys, but, something to think about that, I've come across.
I think that rings true to my thinking lately. Was I kind of envision, I like visuals like a graph or a chart or something like that, but I just kind of imagine like your life story is this timeline that goes birth to, kind of where you are now. And then at each point there's like a high or a low that's very memorable, and that's maybe your trauma could be one of those. And then you have an opportunity at that point to continue along that line and maybe go down a little bit as a diminished copy of yourself because of the trauma. Or you can break from that event and go in an alternate reality that's all about growth. And that's, I think, the perspective that you're talking about. Growth is about having a newfound perspective. And you can always go back and visit that traumatic date, like on an anniversary. If you linger there too long, maybe you'll go back to that feeling that you had when you first found out, and it can be a dark day for you and maybe a dark week. And this is part of the process. I think that's okay. But to just, if you can, drop the backpack and look at where you are right now today and how far you've gone. It's a wonderful perspective that you have that you didn't have before. So that's all part of growth too. So that's what it kind of means to me.
See, Paul has got his hand raised.
So Gerbil actually brought up a really good point, dealing with post-traumatic growth and setbacks. I know there are some things that hit the setback button for me pretty hard. Webb, I don't know if you've ever dealt with any of the guys. Well, remember Brian from last time we did this. So, talking to Brian, listening to some of the stories that he was bringing back up, obviously it's coming from his perspective. There were huge memory gaps in there for me, and a memory gap on critical incidents where, yeah, there is an emotional trauma that's involved with a lot of these incidents, where your friend gets his foot blown off or something like that, and for me, missing the memory of it is probably one of my bigger setbacks. It will actually slow down my growth quite a bit, and it puts me in reverse. Probably in that same vein, if I drink too heavy, which I have been known to do once or twice, if I drink too heavy, I can actually hit a setback where my explosive temper starts coming back out again, and that's never a fun thing to be around for anybody, including myself. Those are some of the setbacks that I hit, and obviously revisiting the site, and like Gerbo was saying, if I dwell there too long or dwell on that memory too long, it can really hit the reset button for me on a lot of this growth. I didn't know what y'all's feelings on that were, or what your experiences are, but that's something that is in the back of my mind, and that's something in the back of my mind as I get older, because, well, obviously, as we get older, we start to lose a little bit more. And I'm talking about much more advanced age, probably closer to end of life type of older. But that's something that I do have some concerns about. What do y'all?
I can speak to that. I wanted to mention about what Brad had said about being on lockdown, so to speak, and then still him going out and doing something. He said, "Oh, well, I can still do something." I think there's kind of a trend there with what Greg had mentioned earlier about you didn't say I can still do something, but basically what you're saying, even if I can only give 10% help to somebody, I'm still doing something. So there's kind of a trend there, I think, with that same mindset with some people that have experienced similar things. It's like, well, if I can't do anything, well, if I can't do 100%, man, this is all I can get. And that's like I think that's a path to, like, it's a long path, but making small incremental changes is about making make small changes to make that one big change a step ahead. And I think that seems like a commonality that I had noticed. But yeah, like as far as setbacks go, I had talked to Brian on the phone for like 2 hours the other day just to like catch up, and it was weird to me because he was reminding me of things that I had completely forgotten. And when I realize that I don't remember those things, I feel slightly debilitated. And that is where, for me, in that type of situation, that's where a setback can come for me, because it's kind of debilitating and I can't remember something. But he was telling me, "Do you remember when?" And I would say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And then he would say this, that, and the other, and then it would take me a moment, and I would remember only bits and pieces of it. And that was definitely a setback for me. Even one of your guys, initials JM, I met him. I spent weeks with him, smoking cigars at a fire pit, and I had seen him when we were on that that training event together, and it was like I had seen him for the first time, but it was the same for him, which was also interesting. So yeah, that's a bit of a setback, but at the same time, when someone else tells me that they have that same problem, it doesn't make it as bad for me. So.
Brad, did you have your hand up?
I did. I think Dan's got something to say. I think he was reaching for the mic, or no?
Oh, I was, but if you had something, go for it. It was just, I was going to be willing to share a story on setbacks and different types, but I guess I had a question for you guys too, and then maybe this is good for the larger audience. When we talk about those setbacks, I mean, what is it? Because there are different symptoms of PTSD. There isn't just this one broad thing. I mean, there's anxiety that comes, depression, the ability to maintain relationships, things like that. So I was just kind of thinking about it as you guys were talking, and it just raised a story to me, and I'll share it quickly. But it's you guys all know my event. I got blown up in Iraq, and I actually just found this out. I had a 1% chance of living. The doctor in Baghdad, ER, contacted me just like a month ago out of the blue. I don't know how he got a hold of me, but man, it was a wonderful conversation. And he actually shared some photos with me and some documentations from that day, and talked about how much it meant to him. And but anyways, but so going from that type of recovery, when I was going through that I guess I'll say darker road of PTSD, the early stages of it, what I had found to be kind of my strength and my energy to move forward in a positive way, well, it was my kids, it was my children. It was their relationship, the relationship I have with them, that just really wanted me to get better and live a happy, meaningful life. But the setback was when I got divorced. And what it was, the divorce it was a separation of the ones that were giving me the strength and energy to move forward and come out of that deep, dark area. Oh my God, guys, I went into the deepest, darkest hole ever. It was so bad. What it was, it felt like my lifeline was taken away from me again. And it wasn't the loss of my ex-wife; it was the loss of my children. And then the thoughts of what is life going to be like as a divorcee? You know, I'm never going to see him, never going to have the relationship I wanted. Well, the growth where it comes into play was when I did move to Chicago, and it was like, well, I have to be with them. I have to do whatever I can to create those meaningful relationships and spend time. So yeah, over the last 10 years, what I did was I probably sacrificed other relationships with girls I dated. I lived with a girl, and a lot of times it would be that tough balance of, you know, what was important to me and what was important to them. Well, my children were important to me at that time, and relationships were broken because of that. But that is part of that struggle, that continuum struggle of PTSD. It's not this one-off solution that we're going to feel better one day and things are going to go on. No, it's a struggle, a daily struggle, and then there's different setbacks. So again, with the loss of the children leaving, or separation, if I should say, it put me to this deep, dark depression. But then the growth was, well, let's spend time. So yeah, over the last 10 years, I'd get my weekends, not mine, days that are not mine. Make sure I pick them up, take them to every basketball, cheerleading practice, whatever it was. But that was investing that time and making it meaningful, building those relationships. But at the same time, we're still in that cycle of PTSD. So that's my story.
No, man, that's awesome. That's exactly it, man. It's finding your why, whatever your why is, you know, whether it's your kids, your community, or some combination thereof. You know, it doesn't have to be just one, just the other. It's whatever. And you know, talking about what Webb was talking about with memories and losing some of them. There's I can't remember the name of the book. It's The Last Spartan, I think is what it's called. It's about this Green Beret dude that goes into this Afghanistan village and basically lives with them, like, you know, Rambo style, like First or Third Blood or whatever the hell it was. But he talks about the bonds he created with them because of that sense of community and like, hey, we're here for you. We are, you know, here with you. We live with you. We eat with you. We exist with you. And you know, and he talked at the end about how he wanted those to be the last memories he lost. The whole point of that being, that really shook something in me to say like, hey, what memories matter to me? And I started thinking back, you know, back to like deployments and like the hard times and the crappy times and the tough stuff and like the things that you don't want to do. And I started to realize, like, for the longest time, I was kind of living a life of where I was trying hard to forget those by like drowning them in way too much booze. Like, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy beers, and it's okay, I think, to drink a couple of beers. But I absolutely went overboard for a couple of years. And what I'm trying to get to now is to the point where I don't want to, you know, completely forget everything. I don't want, in fact, I would rather remember everything than forget anything if I can help it. I think back to, you know, our time with Team Lima, and I can tell you for a fact there was, you know, an automatic 2 weeks afterwards. I don't remember shit. I remember like 2 or 3 experiences, and that's it. Um, but like it's interesting to look at memory and like what your mind does to protect you in a way, and versus you know, trying to not lose what you can. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that, but if you do, you know, man.
Well, I'll just repeat one of my favorite quotes is that, you know, joy shared is joy multiplied, grief shared is grief divided. Going back to that whole having a tribe, having your family, you know, having your friends. And without that, yeah, we do tend to self-medicate and go through that process. You know, you gotta have something. So one of them is more of a healthy outlet, I think. You know, having peers like you guys, having family. Um, but then without one, you kind of have to do something, right? So it's kind of a normal. That's a very common story, the self-medicating part. You know, where it's not just an enjoyment thing, but it's an escape from or deafening the pain as much as you can. So the growth piece would be somebody who does the latter, you know, and kind of goes for the whole peer thing, and that's rather than kind of taking it on yourself and whatever you can get to numb the pain, because all you're doing is prolonging, right, the growth. You're not really involved in it. And so, yeah, and then Dan, your story, man, I really appreciate that. One of my struggles when we were talking about, can you share a war story? You know, I really have more of that human story, like Brad was talking about, like you were talking about with divorce and having your, you know, your the custody of the child kind of goes to the ex, and you don't really get to spend that much time with them anymore, and that you have to. I found that in my journey from those days is that you have to give yourself some love. You got to forgive yourself. You got to accept yourself before you can even move on and even reach out to others. You have to kind of be good with yourself. And I really had to go through that process. It wasn't easy, but to get to a point where I'm like, you know, this wasn't all my fault. You know, I'm good with it. I'm a better person for it. And maybe I can be better now because of I've forgiven myself. I'm not going to constantly beat myself up for having the relationship breakdown or whatever. So I think that's another. So there's a kind of an internal locus and an external locus. But having a tribe, having a group can be very helpful for the good and the bad. Obvious, right?
Talking about the effects of post-traumatic growth and how it can be positive, I wanted to share a story of something that had happened to me earlier this year. I think that I mentioned that the reading that we all went through and some of the education we have is like the resiliency versus post-traumatic growth. They're different. Resiliency being your ability to bounce back from something, and PTG being your ability to experience, trauma or violence or PTSD, and then actually come out on top of that poor experience. I think some of the things that I had experienced in the past allowed me to move past an experience that I had this year. Not move past it like I want to forget it, but able to digest it and process it to where it wasn't completely debilitating to me. I'll share this is a really simple deployment story that I had experienced that just still, for some reason, it just bugs me. We had suicide VBED come up and blow our cop up, and a couple of guys were buried. So incidentally, we were uncovering these guys, and we were really close to getting one of the guys out so that he could just get out of there. And we were trying to get this material moved away from him so we could pull him out. And it was those cots. You guys know those stackable cots. So I was cutting a stackable cot out of the way so we could pull this dude out. And I was cut this material and move it out of the way, cut this material, move it out of the way, grab this material, and I cut it, and it wasn't the cot. It was actually the guy's uniform. But it had all looked the same to me at that point because it was completely covered with rubble. And I saw the subcutaneous layer of this guy's leg. And I never forget that. It's such a really small, simple thing. Like it didn't kill him or anything, but I was trying to help this guy the best that I could, but then I went and I cut his leg. That always bugs me, but I've been able to get past that because I know that I was doing my best to try to help him. I know that I was doing the best that I could. I mean, if anything, I was doing 10% at least. But I cut, I cut him. I was trying to help him. That's always bothered me. But I've been able to get past that because I have thought about, what did all the effort that led up to before I actually, it was just a small little nick. But I always think about what did that effort lead up to? What did I learn from that? So I've been able to grow from that and several other experiences, but that's just one short example. So Earlier this year, unbeknownst to me, my stepbrother had been having some real difficulties. He had been running a business, and he was a appliance repair mechanic, and he owned his own business. And I didn't know him very well, and I didn't spend a lot of time with him, so I didn't have a lot of close contact with him. But my parents were in Florida, and my stepbrother went missing. So I was kind of trying to, pay attention and see what was going on. There was a couple of notices out for him. My dad called me, and he said, "Hey, they found his car in this park." And I was in uniform, and he's like, "They're not telling me anything." My dad was in Florida, so he couldn't do anything about it. We're up here in Maryland area. So I said, "I'll go over there. I'll talk to the police. Maybe it'll help because I'm in uniform. I know that's not right, but if I could get him some information, then maybe that would help." So I went over there, and they didn't really have a whole lot of information. They were kind of looking around. It was a park, and there's huge vegetation around it in the woods and all this stuff. They showed me where his car was. So I kind of thought about it for a while, and I had the instinct that if that's where they found his car, if he had done something to hurt himself, he's probably there. So I looked around just kind of haphazardly. I didn't really put any effort into it. What I was really doing was getting information from the police, talking to some of his friends that had been there to maybe, I don't know, maybe someone hurt him, pulled him somewhere. Maybe he was, I don't know, in trouble somewhere. So I ended up being able to go into the woods and find him. And unfortunately, he had taken his own life. It wasn't obviously it's not a positive experience. But with the PTG that I had, the growth I'd experienced in the past, I had some of the tools that I needed to move forward from that experience. And what I did was try and find what, they're not positives, but what did I actually do that helped someone? And this is what I did. I went and I got my parents the information they didn't have. They knew their son was missing. They couldn't find him. They didn't have any information. They didn't know if he was hurt. They didn't know what it was. The police couldn't find him, but I was able to go in and find him and actually call my parents from there and let them know, hey, this is the situation. And not being a favorable situation that it was, I was still able to get them the information, but moving forward after that, I still think about it daily, but it's not interrupting me to where I can't perform. And it's not because I didn't care about my stepbrother, and it's not because it wasn't a poor experience for me. It's because in the past, I've been able to grow from some of the traumatic experiences that I have had, which have given me some of the resiliency to bounce back from that. And hopefully that makes sense. But I had already grown at that point. So I had the tools that I needed to go in there and find him and get my parents the information. But that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, man. Said, just reflecting back on everything you said bounce back a couple of times, and I was listening to something about post-traumatic growth. You can also think of it as sort of a bouncing forward. Like, you're not going back to where you were. You've learned, like you said, some tools now. So when trauma comes, and it will, you have those tools to be ready to deal, right? And to, it's not a coping mechanism necessarily. It's something more. It's a positive, like a growth things. So I think absolutely you can, trauma can coexist with growth, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, it's a powerful story, man. Almost like, like there's a higher power guiding you to do stuff, it's amazing. Thank you.
Hey, Webb. It's a hell of a story, man. I'm sorry you had to go through it. And I'm glad you were able to give some closure to your family. That's always hard. You reminded me about Cop Brunk as well. That day, I honestly thought all three of you died down there that day. We watched that gigantic dust cloud go up from Cop Ware, and I think we were running out the door about 5 minutes later. Part of that QRF heading down to go see you guys, and up comes Bebop and Aaron Weber. Dude, it was quite a relief to see you. You probably should have been medevac that day. Probably. I know Hannibal definitely needed it that day as well. But one of the more important things that you did that day was everybody lived because of the actions that you guys had that day. Nobody died in the rubble. Nobody gave up. Everybody got out. And yeah, you did a hell of a lot more than a 10% solution, dude. I mean, you did a 99.9% solution with just a little bit of extra work in there. And you've always been a person that solves a problem for other people. And that is something that's been absolutely awesome to know about you, man. Even when you're struggling yourself, you've always looked out for other people, man. And it's what makes you an awesome dude.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
So I want to throw a couple ideas out to some people. We talked about the 5 areas of post-traumatic growth, and I'm gonna kind of put an idea out there, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so to speak. But we look at these 5 things. We've got deeper relationships, personal strength, spiritual and existential change, sense of appreciation for life, and new possibilities. What I want to put out to you guys is to think about those things and try and think of some personal examples you could share, because I've got some in mind, and some of them relate to multiple of you here in this conversation right now. Dan, I can't even tell you, like the day we found out what happened to you. Man, that was rough. That was rough, dude. I still remember exactly where I was. I was out on the South Range Hill on Dugway, and Matt Hefty called me, or MH, whatever. He called me and told me about, you were hurt, and I had to tell everybody else who was out there with us, but he gave me all the full details, and I didn't share them all right away. But because I figured you were gonna, be who you are and make it through, but things like that, they give you that sense of appreciation for life, like I really got to value what I have. I got to value everything I have right now, because how quick can it be gone? In a phone call, things can change in a second. Your life, not only your life, but other people's lives can change. Like, that wasn't my life that changed. That was your life, Dan. But it affected my life in an indirect way, And, have you guys experienced any type of growth from either, some kind of trauma-related event that affected deeper relationships, personal spiritual change, appreciation for life, or new possibilities? Some kind of food for thought. Is there anything you guys could share about that? Go for it, man.
Speaking of that same instance that Greg and I just talked about, and my team leader had been medevac. He had he was all right, but his sinuses were completely like perforated, and he was a team leader at that time. He was doing incredible work, like amazing. Just the amount of things that he was finding and defeating, it was just absolutely amazing in that time. But when after that, on our way home, he was smoking a cigar and then closing off his nose and blowing smoke out of his ear. And they kind of they didn't push him off to the side, but they put him on the desk, and they kind of just, it didn't seem like he got this amount of treatment that looking back, that he probably should have got, one, or recognition too, for all the things that he had done. But moving forward with the growth portion of it, that same guy now, he's been promoted 2 or 3 times after that. He's running marathons. He just qualified for the Boston Marathon, which is absolutely insane. The blast that he experienced in that time, it sent him like flying through the air for 27 feet. He got up after that. They put him on the desk. His head was all messed up, but he was still able to like move forward. Like when I talk to him from time to time, he's doing so much more than he was doing before that incident. I think I'm like, wow, this guy's a complete powerhouse. How does he do all these things? He's a complete machine. So I know that it's possible because of people like that. It's just like that. To actually qualify for the Boston Marathon, you have to be I'm not a runner and I don't like it that much. So, but to me, you have to be a complete freak to be able to do that. So for him to be able to do all that stuff and get relegated down like that, and then come out on top, but also still be an absolute stellar performer in other areas of his life, a father, senior NCO, just completely amazing to me. He's one of my heroes. That's my example.
So I think where this is kind of going, and just at least where how I'm viewing this is, each of you, everyone on this call we've kind of gone through that, and we still are. We will forever go through this growth. But I love what we're doing today. I think this is our next mission of sharing this experience and help educate others along the way, and maybe be that example or that little bit of inspiration for someone. And I'll give a quick story. A gentleman I worked with in Chicago, I was doing risk consulting work for several years, and worked at big corporate 500 company, suit and tie every day. And this one guy, he comes up to me one morning, he goes, "Dan," he goes, "what is your goddamn problem?" He goes, "Do you ever have a bad day? Why do you walk in here every morning smiling?" I just kind of chuckled and back. All right, I'll call him Mr. S. Come with me in the office. Let's go talk. And I just said, I go, absolutely, I have bad days. I go, let me tell you a little bit about it. I just give him a couple of stories about what my night was like, dealing with the kids, doing this, getting home, taking the train home, long days, long hours. I go, absolutely. I go, but you know what? I go, if I could come in here every day with a smile and that little bit of energy feeds off to somebody else, anyone else in that room, and they're happy about being here today, and they go ahead and have a good, high performing day, well, then it counts. It was worth it, And it's just those little things that if we could do that and do a little bit more and continue to do this, and I'll tell you what, right now, I'm in all the way, man. You guys, anytime you guys reach out, want to do more of this, I'm in. But that is it. I think that's our growth, and this is the next step of that growth.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one of the growth areas, the growth outcomes, is in your top 5, Brad, but an inner wisdom, an inner strength, an inner peace, something like that, that people feed off of that energy that you put out after you've experienced that growth. And not everybody does, but a high percentage that does say that they have experienced growth after trauma will usually have one of those categories as their thing. Maybe not all of them, but I think having an inner strength and a wisdom after the event is really helpful going forward.
Webb, what you got?
Uh, that's good info. Dan, I like what you said when someone asks you, do you ever have a bad day? That's a really great compliment, I think, that somebody could give you. It's in general. It reminded me of something that I haven't forgotten. My wife and I went to an after-duty function, and she met this guy for the first time, and this guy had spent some time in the Ranger Battalion and some other places doing some specific missions, and had some experiences. And I knew him, and I knew some things about him, and I knew that at that time he was having a tough time. But when he met my wife, I said, "Hey man, how's it going? This is my wife. I want you, meet my wife." And he was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And then it's like, "How's everything? How is everything?" He's like, "Great." I'm like, this and that. He's like, "Dude, everything is so awesome right now. Life is great. This is great. That's great." He gave me a couple examples. He's like, "Oh, this PT this morning was amazing, and I just did this and that." And then we walked away, and my wife was like, "I don't know that guy, but I really like that guy." She's like, "I really like him." And when I saw her reaction to what the positive, like that, just that positivity could do, that positive outlook could do, when I saw her react to that, anytime anybody asks me anything now, it's amazing. There's exceptions, obviously, but when someone says, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Dude, we are killing it right now. We're destroying it. We're chopping the mountain down. Life is amazing. You can't stop us. We're unstoppable." And they're like, "Oh, wow, these guys are really great." And I kind of took that lesson from the way that my wife reacted, so that reminded me of it. But yeah, I understand that. That's a good example. I appreciate that. Thanks.
That's you to a T, Webb. Very optimistic. I appreciate that.
It's a 50% real, 50% fake.
Hey, fake it till you make it, right? Nothing wrong with that.
So does anybody got any further stories to add? Any further anecdotes? Any further thoughts, or anything else? I'm not trying to force the end, of course, here, but try to conclude, kind of wrap up this conversation, at least for the recorded portion. We can absolutely continue it after, but any thoughts you guys have about what we've talked about so far tonight?
I'll go. Am I on? Yep. All right, good. Well, first and foremost, thank you guys all for sharing some really, really deep stories, and it just makes it all worth it to hear those. And I don't know, my takeaways are this. I think the biggest thing that we all kind of touched on in one way or another is that we don't know how others are feeling or what's going through their mind. But if we take the moment to listen, maybe try to learn, that there alone, that one step can be tenfold. And I again, just with I mean, the stories, it just brought up so many other stories, and just different parts of life where, again, I think I hit it where I just said it's a continuous cycle. There is no end point to this. So hearing your story just really just kind of uplifted me. It gave me that little bit of motivation that I think I've been lacking since we've been on COVID lockdown. We don't take it that serious here in America like you guys do in Italy, but but we get those bit of setbacks, and they're always going to be there. So I don't know. I think I have more points, but I just appreciate you guys, man, and I'm happy to know people like you and keep inspiring others. I think that's where we go from here.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Dan, and 100% agree. And what I can hope we get from this, and by all means, if you guys have more to add, just raise your hand or unmute your mic, jump in. But like one of the big things we want to get out of this is to increase that communication. Like, reach out to somebody, reach out, even if it's just one-on-one conversation. Like, just talk to somebody, man. Like, if you're having trouble, you're having some struggles, you're thinking about some hard times a little more than normal, or even just a lot. Just talk to somebody about it. Like, that's what a lot of this comes back to is um, you're gonna experience hard times in life, period. Right? That's just what this comes back to is that's life. Is you're gonna experience trouble, you're gonna experience trauma, and a big part of life is getting through that. Like that's this whole like almost life is learning, and the whole wisdom part is helping others get through that as well as yourself. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I know I'm going to experience a bunch more in my life, and I don't know. I hope, all I hope is that what we talked about here tonight and what we communicated encourages other people to reach out when they need help, at the very least, and if not, amongst us. So if anybody's got anything else, please add in.
Well, just to pile onto that, something Dan mentioned that, yeah, it kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with my mom earlier today was the whole COVID thing, the whole lockdown. A lot of people, even if they really don't think like I did before, I was telling before we hit record, I feel like I've led this more or less Nerf life. Life is good, and then maybe I've got some different coping skills. Maybe I've just been lucky. But man, I didn't really think about it. But yeah, I think we're all struggling through this whole, like, what's our normal now? Like, I feel like a walk around the neighborhood is a celebration for me because I can actually do that without having to wear a mask or be looked at funny or yelled at. It's like, hey, that's a normal guy trying to get some exercise in his neighborhood. So, and a lot of people are kind of going to social media to either kind of vent out or like read in, and it's some crazy times, man. And with the election year and everything, I think there's a whole lot of people struggling, whether they realize it or not. So yeah, my hope too to the general audience out there, if you can't connect with this whole veteran vibe of experience with post-traumatic growth, just find out what it means to you. Like, just take stock of what's going on, understand yourself a little bit, maybe a little self-awareness. Say, yeah, I could improve on this a little bit if I just kind of call my dad or whatever that, we're saying we can't do, just something, one little thing would be wonderful if they could just take that away from this. And again, I'm going to say welcome aboard, Dan. I think it was awesome having you here, and always great to see you too, Greg and Webb and Brad. Thank you.
Webb, Polly, you guys got anything to add?
I don't have much to add, but I guess I'll put in a plug. To reach out to people, make sure we're connecting with people. Like it's been mentioned by both Dan and Gerbo, we are in COVID. Up here in the Northeast, we're in a pretty decent COVID lockdown right now. It's not as bad as it was earlier in the year, but it's still worth it to make the connection. Yeah, it's more difficult now, but it's still worth it to reach out to people, whether it be through phone call or what have you. I know I have a 45-minute drive to and from work, and normally I'll spend at least a portion of that trying to reach out to somebody, whether it be a family member or somebody that I know needs the phone call at that point in time. Try to make the connection. And as I said in the beginning, it might not be the perfect answer, but it's at least a step in the right direction. So just keep it up and keep on reaching out.
Thanks again. Thanks for moderating this. You do a great job. Really appreciated being part of the conversation.
All right, cool. We'll wrap it up there. Hopefully everybody took something away from this. And if not, please, let us know.